Number 14. In order to save the created beings from this great distance, the desire to receive, which is the fourth aspect of coarseness, separates the created beings from the Creator. And therefore it was made the secret of the first construction, the Tzimtzum Aleph, the idea of which is to separate this fourth aspect from all the partsufim of holiness, in a way that the measure of the desire to receive remains empty and vacated from light. Why? Because this desire to receive separates the creation from the Creator. Because all the partsufim of holiness come out with a masach, a barrier set in their fourth aspect, that it won't receive light in this aspect. And then when the divine light is drawn forth to the created being, and this masach deflects the light back, it's considered a hitting between the upper light and the masach. This is to say, the idea of hitting is about two aspects that are contradictory. Each one contradicts the other one. So when the divine light is drawing forth to the created being, what is its power? It's the power of wanting to give goodness to the created being. God wants to give goodness to the creation. But the masach is reflecting the light back. So we explained. What is a masach in material terms? Masach in physical terms is like a curtain that is drawn to keep the light out. But when we're speaking in spiritual terms, what is a masach? A masach is a decision. A person decides not to make use of their desire to receive. A person goes against making use of their desire to receive. So therefore we have in a person two powers. One power of the desire to receive. The desire to receive, when it becomes aware of something good, is interested in receiving it. As our sages say, that the eye sees and the heart desires. On the other hand, there's a going against wanting to receive the light. Because the desire to receive separates the created being from the Creator. And the created being doesn't want to be separated from the Creator. So within the person themselves, there's two forces that are contradicting one another. The sages call this the good inclination and the bad inclination. The bad inclination is the desire to receive that wants to receive. It's yearning to receive. The good inclination wants to attach to God. So it contradicts the desire to receive. Sometimes this is called the animal soul and the divine soul. The animal soul wants to receive. The divine soul doesn't want to receive. Wants to attach to its source, which is God. And sometimes this is called soul and body. All of these terms are delineating the same matter. They're coming to delineate these two powers that contradict one another, that exist within ourselves. Good evening, everybody. We're on number 14. So what is he saying to us here? That when the upper light draws forth and shines to the created being, meaning the upper light is in a state of absolute rest, but when the created being feels the divine light, then the created being delineates this as that the divine light is drawing forth and shining. The masach deflects the light. What is the masach again? If in physical terms we're saying about a physical masach, like a curtain, that we open it and it stops the light of the sun from entering the room and bothering people. But if we're talking in spiritual terms, what is a masach? Decision. A person decides not to receive. So what is this decision resting on? On reasons. Different reasons. If, for example, gave an example yesterday, but the example yesterday we can change with all different examples. For example, give a different example today. Somebody hurt me. So my desire to receive, that wants to experience enjoyment and pleasure, what pleasure can it receive here? To take revenge. Because in taking revenge on somebody, there's a pleasure that all the honor that was taken from me, take it back. The desire to give says that's forbidden to take revenge. It says in the Torah, don't take revenge. It's forbidden from the Torah. So there's two contradictory forces. Someone who hurt me in public and feeling a lot of pain from it and a lot of suffering from it. So the desire to receive wants to take revenge. It has a desire to take revenge. And the desire to give is against taking revenge. So there's two opposite desires. The question is, who's going to succeed? In the realms of holiness, the desire to give overcomes. This is described here as a masach. Masach is a hard strength that returns the light, meaning that it deflects the pleasure. It doesn't receive the pleasure. Why it doesn't receive the pleasure? There could be different reasons. It could be because of wanting honor. A person makes an accounting that if they take revenge on the other, they won't be looked at well among their friends. So they don't take revenge because the person wants honor. So in this situation, the masach is rooted in a desire to receive. So we have two desires to receive that are contradicting one another. The desire to receive revenge and the desire to receive that's against this desire. Why? Because it's also rooted in wanting to receive. Because the person won't look good in the public eyes if they take revenge. They'll look like a little kid that's not able to stop themselves. But there could be another reason that it says in the Torah, don't take revenge. So the person knows that if they go against the Torah, they're going to lose out something in this world and also in the world to come. So it's also rooted in a desire to receive. In the way of holiness and in the realms of holiness, we're speaking about a cause being the desire to give. The person goes against receiving because the person wants to be pleasing to God, not because of their own self-interest, but because the person loves God. And since God commanded not to take revenge, and because the person wants to attach to God, so then the person doesn't take revenge because they want to be pleasing to God. So what am I showing here? That a lot of times there's two different forces that are contradictory within ourselves. In the realms of holiness, the two contradictory powers are the desire to receive and the desire to give. The power of the masach, which is the decision, the hard decision and the complete decision not to take revenge is founded on belief in the exaltedness of God. The Masach is founded on belief in the exaltedness of God. And therefore the Zohar says that the material of the Masach is awe of God. That's what it says in the Zohar, in Ma'amar of the Chezba of Rabbi Chia. So the Masach deflects the light, deflects the pleasure, which is a collision between the upper light and the Masach. It's a battle between two forces or two opinions that are within a person themselves. This hitting of the Masach raise up returning light from below to above, and the returning light clothes the 10 sfirot of the upper light. So what do we need to depict to ourselves here? The upper light of God shines to the creation. How does it shine? We learned in number 5, at first Keter, then Chochmah, Bina, Zeranpin. Those are 9 sfirot, because the Zeranpin contains 6. This is called the shining of the light to the created being. The created being being the great desire to receive, called Malchut. Now this big desire to receive, which is the creation, enacts upon itself a Masach, a hard power of decision, and deflects the upper light, meaning that it goes against receiving the upper light. One of the basic spiritual laws is that there is no coercion in spirituality. If the lower one doesn't want to make use of their desire to receive, so then no, the light disappears, because there's no coercion in spirituality. So again, we need to depict to ourselves that the light is drawing forth from above to below. Above it's God, which is above in importance. Below is the created being, lower in importance. The created being deflects the light, says I don't want it. So returns the light. So the light returns. The light returns back. So now he's saying to us something new. This Masach raises the returning light from below to above, from the created being to the creator, and clothes the 10 sfirot of the upper light. What does it mean in spiritual terms to clothe? To receive. In spirituality, the concept of clothing means to receive. So something new here. 2 different things are happening. First of all, the created being doesn't want to receive. Suddenly finds that it is receiving. Something else different is that the light receives, because the returning light clothes the 10 sfirot of the upper light, meaning it receives. How can light receive? A vessel can receive. How can light receive? He explains, because the same portion of the light that's deflected back is called returning light. The same portion of the light that was shining to the created being is called direct light, that comes directly from God's desire to give goodness to the lower one who's receiving. And the portion of the light that the lower one deflects back is called returning light. And as it's clothing the upper light, it's made afterwards a vessel of receiving the upper light in place of the 4th aspect. Because we said that the 4th aspect is now no good for receiving. That's we learned at the beginning of number 14, that in order to save the created being from this great separation, because this great desire to receive is a created being, In the Creator, there's no desire to receive, only desire to give. So if the created being makes use of its desire to receive, it's separated from God. So in order to save the created being from this great distance, it was made the secret of the first tzimtzum, the first constriction. So it's described for us here the process that's going on. That the moment that the upper light shines to the created being, the created being activates the power of the masach and deflects the light back. And this light that's deflected back close the upper light. We need to understand this. The idea is like this. Why is it forbidden for the created being to receive? Because if the created being receives, it separates it from God. Therefore, it needs to deflect the upper light. So the Baal Sulam gives on this an example. We'll go on to 15 now, the next one. The next number, and we'll learn the example, the metaphor. In 15, a couple lines from the beginning, he says, I'll explain to you now from an example in this world. Have you found the place? Explain to you from the example of this world. It's in the nature of a person to be beloved in their eyes, the characteristic of giving, and to be low in a person's eyes, the characteristic of receiving from one's friend. And therefore, a person goes to their friend's house. Someone travels to visit their friend from Yerushalayim to Haifa, hasn't seen their friend for some years. And the host asks the friend to eat by them. Even if the friend is very hungry, the friend declines eating. Why? Because it's lowly in the friend's eyes to be receiving from their friend. So the person says to their friend, no thank you. I don't want. I'm not hungry. He has all sorts of excuses. I already ate. My wife prepared for me. There's lots of excuses. But the main thing is that he says he doesn't want. Then when the host tries to convince him enough, until it becomes revealed to the friend that he'll do the host a favor by eating by them, then the person agrees to eat. What happened? Something simple happened. The whole time that the friend felt that they were receiving and that the host would be giving to them, they were embarrassed. Why? Because receiving doesn't exist in our source. But if the friend, the host, continues to insist, and the friend continues to refuse the host and say that doesn't want to eat, this argument and these two forces that are going against one another, the force of the friend that wants the friend to eat and the force of the guest that's declining to eat, these two forces transform the desire. They give the guest a feeling that if the guest will eat, they'll be doing a favor for the host. Now, when a person's doing a favor, they're not embarrassed. When a person's receiving, they're embarrassed. But if a person's giving and doing kindness, not embarrassed. Why? Because our source, which is God, is giving. That's what happens here. So then the person eats, because the person doesn't feel that they're receiving a gift from their friend who's the giver. But the opposite, the guest feels that they're the one giving, and they're doing a favor to their friend by receiving the meal. So here we find that even though hunger and appetite is the vessel that's suitable for receiving, And the guest has enough hunger and appetite to receive the meal of the host. The friend is very hungry. But even so, he can't taste anything from the meal because he's embarrassed. It's not pleasant for him. But when his friend begins to insist, and he continues to refuse, then there begins to be formed in the friend new vessels of receiving the meal. What are these new receiving vessels? The desire to give. Because the force of the friend convincing them, and the force of the friend deflecting, the friend's pleading with them. When there's enough of this, they come together to a measure that's enough to transform the vessel of receiving to a vessel of giving. Until the person can depict in their eyes that they're doing a great pleasure to their friend by eating the meal. And then when the person is able to depict this to themselves, he now has a vessel of receiving the host's meal. What's the vessel of receiving? The desire to give. This is to say that the regular vessels of hunger were not good. What's the proof? Because he was embarrassed. He wasn't able to eat with these regular vessels. But after he's attained new vessels, which are called the desire to give, then he is able to eat. And it's now considered that the force of the deflection has become the main vessel of receiving the meal, and not the hunger and appetite, even though they are the regular vessels of receiving. This is the example of the Baal HaSulam. Let's go back to 14. What is the metaphor here? That the upper light shines to the created being. That's similar to the host who's asking the guest to eat. God wants us to enjoy the pleasure. The created being is embarrassed. Deflects the light back. That's called returning light. The returning light clothes the upper light. Why? The returning light is the created being's declining to receive. This that the created being declines receiving, goes against receiving, and proves this in actuality, transforms the created being to be a giver. And therefore, in the language of Kabbalah, the concept of returning light means desire to give. So in place of receiving the light in its essence, which is desire to receive, the created being now creates new vessels of returning light. What's or choser? Or light means pleasure. Returning means I want to give the pleasure back to God. Meaning, I have pleasure by giving to God. And then I'm able to receive. When my pleasure is to give to God, then I'm able to receive. This is the metaphor and the meaning. We'll read it again. Number 14. In order to save the created being from this great separation, it was made the secret of the first tzimtzum, the first constriction. The idea is that it separates this fourth aspect from all the partsufim of holiness. It's forbidden to make use of the fourth aspect, which is the big desire to receive, in a manner that this measure of receiving becomes a vacated space, vacated of all light. Because all the partsufim of holiness come out with a masach, a barrier, set in their fourth aspect, that it won't receive light in this fourth aspect. And then when the upper light is drawn forth and shines in the created being, we need to depict to ourselves that the upper light is drawing forth from the Creator, from Keter, passing through the processes, the stages of Chochmah, Bina, and Zeir Anpin, and now wants to come into the Malchut, which is the great desire to receive. Then the Malchut activates the Masach and says, no way, I don't want to receive. The Masach deflects back, and then it's considered a hitting between the upper light and the Masach, that ascends returning light from below to above. And this returning light clothes the 10 sfirot of the upper light. Because the same portion of the light that's deflected upwards is called returning light. And in its clothing of the upper light is made afterwards a vessel of receiving the upper light in place of the fourth aspect. This is to say, he's showing us here that the action of the deflecting of the light transforms to be giving. Because it's born here new vessels of desire to give, they're called returning light, because they come from returning the light. And these new vessels clothe the upper light in place of the fourth aspect. The fourth aspect has become no good for receiving. Therefore, the fourth aspect itself needs to make a masach. On who? On itself. And by it making a masach on itself, become born new vessels that are able to receive the light. The Rebbe's asking if there's questions.